So we finished last segment talking a little bit about the rest of the AFC, the matchups today.
We finished with Gage Larvidan.
That's right. Gage Larvidan is where we finished because that's any logical, starting
Any
and finishing point of the show.
To end a show or a segment.
Talk a little about today the injury reports, which I've got in front of me here for the Bills. Definitely thinning out in terms of players at the top. I believe Christian Benford and Terrell Bernard will each not have injury designations for this game. They both were full participants at the end of the week, and both are expected to be back in the lineup. One thing I did want to mention before kind of getting through the injuries, too, is Max Hairston. So last week, Max Hairston played every snap because no Terrell Bernard. And I did want to just kind of mention that, they really put him on an island backside in a lot of man-to-man looks. And he just kind of did his thing, handled business. I thought Maxwell Hairston played really well last week. And all of this to say is that Tre'Davious White's playing the best football he's played in probably 3 or 4 seasons now. And I think the Bills have a really good problem on their hands, which is they've got 3 capable starting level corners, including their rookie, who, I think we all have a little PTSD over rookie first-round corners after Kyer Elam.
Why? What happened?
I want to tell you that I feel confident that he is not going to be Kyer Elam.
And that's a pretty confident thing to say. I think there was a lot, though, of the potential comparisons of Tre'Davious White to Max Hairston when it came to, corner out of the SEC again, and a guy that he does seem to have a lot of that high-end athleticism, not known as a sticky man corner. That wasn't Trey's draft profile either, but very cerebral, very astute student of the game in this sort of way. So when it comes down to it, I do think that it's impressive that you have Hairston stepping up like this, but also how Trey White stepped up from where his season started this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this too. I've been pretty impressed with, especially a rookie corner that coming in his game was really reliant on speed and man coverage skills, which again is not necessarily this offense or this defense's like bread and butter. They're a zone defense. They're a team that runs a lot of zone heavy. And even last week in the second half, when you saw the Bills really kind of throw the kitchen sink in terms of coverages at the New England Patriots, a lot of that I think is their ability to both play, coverages where like you have a cover 6 or you might have cover 0 on one side and in zone coverage on the other side. I will say Maxwell Hairston has given them a lot of flexibility in the types of coverages that they can run against defenses or opposing offenses. So obviously his speed, I think, is a huge benefactor in this defense because this is not necessarily what I would call the fastest defense in the NFL. They've had a bit of a insurgence of speed, an infusion of speed with Cole Bishop, who is obviously a very good athlete in this defense. And Cole Bishop, maybe isn't making the splash plays he was earlier this season, but I think right now Cole Bishop is looking like a player that you are building around in this Bills defense, especially in the defensive backfield. So Cole Bishop, Maxwell Hairston, you have 2 young players that have really infused speed into this defense, and I feel like you're starting to feel it each and every week that this Bills defense is becoming and looking a little more athletic and a little bit quicker on the field. And listen, the other guy too on this that stood out to me last week, and Joe DiBiase, welcome. Last week to me, we're talking to Cole Bishop and Maxwell Hairston. I thought Hairston played a really great game last week against the Patriots. The other guy, too, that I'll tell you would be such a welcome sign going into this playoffs is if Matt Milano is going to look and play like Matt Milano looked and played last week for the rest of the way. It's a game changer for this defense if they have vintage Matt Milano. I mean, reading and reacting at a high level, looking like he's playing with the speed that maybe he hadn't been playing with coming back from these consistent injuries that he's been sustaining. He's healthy, and I think truly healthy for the first time in years. And that showed to me last week. And I think if you can get get some version of vintage Matt Milano for the rest of the way with having the versatility right now I think you have at corner. I do wonder, like in dime looks, maybe you move Trey down to the dime back or the nickel back, or big nickel or whatever you want to call it, and moving Hairston outside. The Bills now have more versatility, I think, in their cornerback room now that I think there is real trust there with Hairston. But to the point about Milano, it is not nothing to me that they're kind of getting a player now towards this stretch run of games that looks way more like the player we all came accustomed to seeing and kind of relying on in this defense.
Well, he's definitely doing it looking fast also. And if he's going to be used, last week, what are the plays he's making a big impact on? It's on blitzes, right? And for that, he's blowing up Travion Henderson. Henderson actually held his block okay, but Milano had pushed him back so far that he's standing right in Drake May's space where you didn't really even have to get through Henderson to get the sack. You just had to reach out and grab May because you had thrown him back so far. If he can give you that sort of play strength and play speed, then I think you might be thinking about him in run defense and him in coverage if he's got to cover a tight end and a running back. But I'm looking at those plays and thinking this is a pass rush that has kind of been non-existent, and they're going to have to be sending some of those linebackers. And I think they probably want Dorian Williams to do more of that, especially when he's playing like right on the line as a QB spy. But you'd like to have Milano to be capable of doing that because then you don't have to change up your looks. You're not as telegraphed of, Dorian Williams on the field. He's probably blitzing or he's probably spying. If Milano can give you that on top of everything else he's doing, then I think it just gives McDermott another chess piece, another disguise to what he's actually running on his defense. It gives them more options. And I thought that as the season was unwinding, I thought Milano was headed for the bench. I thought it was going to be a tough decision for them to make, but for how good Shaq Thompson has looked at the mic and Terrell Bernard's natural position really being the will linebacker
and being
spot.
A captain.
Right. I thought that we were headed for Thompson and Bernard are going to be their two linebackers. But if Milano's going to play like he did last week and even the last couple weeks, I think they're going to have an even tougher decision. It's
been sort of percolating, I think, for the last couple of weeks that this could be – 10 tackles, 2 sacks last week. And again, sacks aren't necessarily a huge part of his game. But again, I think if this team is going to blitz the way they've been blitzing and disguising coverage the way they did in the second half. Now, obviously, the entire conversation about this Bills defense, and I think largely the offense too gets lumped into this conversation, but the slow starts defensively, that has obviously been a topic of conversation now for a couple of weeks. I think they've been playing far more vanilla in the first half, and I think the thing that has really turned it around for them in the second half of these games is the switch from, rushing 4 and dropping back 7 to we're going to throw man blitzes, we're going to throw zone blitzes, simulated pressures, we're going to have 7-8 guys at the line of scrimmage. Like they've really been, I think, disguising very well, which has always been, I think, a hallmark of the McDermott defenses.
Yeah. I wonder if they're capable of doing things earlier in games that are what you're seeing be successful in the second half. Because they don't have the overall personnel, I would say, yet to just line up toe-to-toe and just beat a team from beginning to end the way you see Houston's defense do it, the way you see Denver's defense do it, the way you'll see Philadelphia's defense do it. I don't think they have the horses for that. I think what they need is the approach that they're taking, which is they're a boxer that is willing to lose the first 3 rounds because, okay, now I know what I'm going to do to you for the next 9, and I'm going to win the fight. I'm going to win the fight because I figured you out. And I wonder if the Bills threw their best stuff at an offense at the beginning of a game. It's going to get dangerously close to they're saving things for the second half. But hear me out. That they might think, why give our best stuff right away at the beginning of the first quarter and give their offense a chance to adjust over the game to what we're doing successfully versus if we kind of hold that back until we absolutely need it. Well, now I'm into the third quarter, and if you're an offensive coordinator, if you're Josh McDaniels, you've only got 4 drives left in the game. You don't really have time to figure out what are they doing to Drake May right now that has got him in a blender. If you do that to him off the first 2 drives, then you're giving McDaniels an entire game to figure that out. So I don't know how conscious that is. I don't know how purposeful that is to say, well, let's save things for the second half. But I think that could be a factor as to why it's looking the way it's looking, is once they change things up, you're not giving the other team a chance to figure out how to counterpunch. And
I do think, too, there's a little bit of, in the chess match that is, and can be football, I think about, too, is like you want them to sort of make the first move. You want to see their hand, or if it's poker, right, you want to see their hand before you react. And I think, again, I've been saying this, but I think this is like broadly very true, which is every NFL defensive coordinator, there are 32 of them, all 32 would tell you if they can start a game rushing 4 and dropping 7 and have success,
sure,
they stop the run and they can stop the pass that way. You have the most, essentially, I mean, you could drop 8 in rush 3, but you essentially have the most pieces in coverage that you can possibly have rushing 4. Right. And with that, you can cover more zones, you can cover more space. So in theory, if you can just manufacture that pass rush with 4 early in a game, that's kind of how you can set the stage later in the game for switching things up. So I do think that that Bobby Babich is not unlike any other defensive coordinator in the league, which is, hey, let's see if we can get away with this, and if we can't, then we'll adjust.
Right. The thing about that, too, is it is dangerous, and I think we've seen evidence of this. It is dangerous to play that way if you're playing a top-level defense that you think can hold your offense in check, right? Like, we saw this happen against Houston. The Texans did a lot on offense in the first half of that game. They did next to nothing in the second half of the game. But why did they win it? Because if you're going to play that way, if you're going to play the slow game on defense where, we're going to come out of the gates rushing 4, and with the state of their defensive line at the moment, that's very rarely going to be a recipe for success. Maybe if they get Ed Oliver back, and maybe if Matthew Judon can give them something, then that could change. But at the moment, you go into a game rushing 4 and dropping 7. This team right now is not going to have a lot of success because they're not getting anywhere near quarterbacks.
Right.
You could play that way, but if you're playing against a Houston, you might not have success because I don't know that your offense is going to be capable of bringing you back the way that you've needed them to.
That's right.
In these other games against weaker defenses. If you want to play that way against New England, because we just saw it against New England does not have a top-level defense. You want to do that against New England? You could probably get away with it.
Yep.
You want to do that against Denver or Houston? I think you're going to have a lot tougher time. Because making up a 16-point gap, if you're being one-dimensional, especially along the way, like you're feeding right into their hands. Those are teams that want to play with the lead. And to me, like those types of games are going to require a different game flow than what you've seen a bunch of times from this defense.